Ordinary Tuesday evening, or so I thought. The clock on the wall ticked away as I sat in the quiet of our living room, my heart pounding in a rhythm that felt all too foreign. For years, my life had been wrapped in the comfortable routine of a decade-long marriage, a picture-perfect home, and a love I believed was unbreakable. Yet, deep inside, an insatiable restlessness had been slowly taking root. That night, with the fading light of dusk painting the sky in gentle hues, I knew I could no longer hide the truth. I gathered every ounce of courage I had and blurted out 3 words that would shatter the fragile piece of our lives. I want him. In that instant, my carefully constructed world crumbled. I saw the shock and confusion flash across his eyes. Eyes that once held endless warmth and comfort, now clouded with hurt and disbelief. I felt the weight of my secret desire, a yearning that had gnawed at me for months, finally break free. It was a desire I could no longer keep hidden, a secret craving that went against everything I thought I knew about myself and my marriage. I had to speak my truth, even though I feared the storm it would unleash. In that charged silence, as my words hung heavily in the air, I realized that my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. The room, once filled with the soft glow of familiarity, now pulsed with tension and uncertainty. And in that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. For the longest time, I convinced myself that what I felt was nothing more than fleeting curiosity, an illusion, a phase. I was married, deeply committed, and had built a life around a love that once felt unshakable. And yet, there was always something lingering beneath the surface, a whisper in the quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts. At first, it was subtle. A glance that lasted too long, a casual conversation that sent an unexpected thrill through me, a longing I couldn't quite name. I dismissed it, pushed it down, suffocated it beneath the weight of responsibility, vows, and the version of myself I was supposed to be. But desires have a way of demanding to be acknowledged. They don't fade just because we tell them to. They grow, they intensify, they take root in the spaces we refuse to look. And mine had become impossible to ignore. The way my heart would race when I was near him, the magnetic pull of his presence, the way my body betrayed me with reactions I couldn't control. It terrified me. I told myself I was wrong for feeling this way, that I was selfish, ungrateful. But no matter how much I fought it, the truth remained. There was a hunger in me that my marriage could no longer satisfy. A craving for something different, something forbidden, something that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. I tried to pretend I didn't want it. I tried to silence the voice inside me that whispered, "What if?" But the more I resisted, the stronger it became. Until one day, resistance was no longer an option. I had to face it. I had to face myself. I can still remember the exact moment everything shifted. The moment I stepped over the invisible line I had spent so long trying not to cross. It wasn't planned. At least that's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew that every glance, every lingering touch, every stolen moment had been leading to this. It started innocently enough. A conversation that stretched longer than it should have, a closeness that neither of us seemed willing to break. We told ourselves we were just talking, just enjoying each other's company, but there was something crackling between us, something neither of us had the courage to name. Then came the touch, his hand brushing against mine, slow, deliberate. My breath hitched, my heart pounded, and suddenly it felt like the entire world had narrowed down to just the 2 of us. I could have pulled away. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Instead, I met his gaze, and in that moment, I saw everything I had been afraid to admit: desire, need, understanding. It was as if he knew, as if he had always known. And when he leaned in, when his lips hovered just inches from mine, I knew there was no turning back. The first kiss was tentative, almost hesitant, as if we were both waiting for the other to stop it. But when neither of us did, hesitation melted into something deeper, something reckless and consuming. His hands on my skin, the warmth of his body against mine, it was electric, intoxicating, a kind of hunger I had never known before. I should have felt guilty. Maybe a part of me did, but in that moment, all I felt was alive. Every doubt, every fear, every rule I had lived by faded into the background. This wasn't just passion, it was something raw, something I had been starving for without even realizing it. And just like that, everything changed. There was no going back. The moment his lips left mine, reality came crashing down. The heat of the moment was gone, replaced by a suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. What had I just done? I pulled away, my heart still racing, but for a different reason now. My mind scrambled for an explanation, an excuse, something to make sense of what had just happened. But there was none. No way to rewrite this. No way to pretend it hadn't happened. I looked at him, searching his face for reassurance, for something to ground me, but all I saw was a mirror of my own turmoil. His breathing was uneven, his eyes dark with something unspoken. For a brief second, I wondered if he regretted it too. The guilt hit me like a tidal wave, relentless and unyielding. What had I done? How could I have let this happen? I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, shattered a boundary I had sworn to protect. Panic gripped me. Would anyone know? Could they see it in my face, hear it in my voice? Was guilt something that showed, something that left a mark? My mind raced through the possibilities. What if someone had seen us? What if someone found out? What if? And yet beneath the guilt, beneath the fear, there was another feeling, one I was too ashamed to name. Because even through the chaos in my mind, even as regret clawed at my conscience, I couldn't ignore the truth. I wanted more. That thought terrified me more than anything else. I wanted to pretend it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness, something I could forget if I just tried hard enough. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't something I could walk away from. The weight of the secret settled in my chest like a stone. I had always thought of secrets as something external, something you carried in silence. But this was different. This secret wasn't just something I held. It was something that held me. And for the first time, I realized there was no turning back. The days that followed were a blur of contradictions. One moment, I was convincing myself it was a mistake, something I could bury beneath the weight of routine and responsibility. The next, I was replaying it in my mind, feeling the ghost of his touch, the heat of his breath against my skin. I was caught between two worlds, one where I was who I had always been, where everything was steady, expected, safe, and another, unfamiliar and dangerous, yet intoxicatingly alive. Every time I saw him, my pulse betrayed me. My mind screamed for distance, but my body leaned in, drawn to something I didn't want to name. And yet when I was alone, the guilt returned, relentless and suffocating. I tried to rationalize it. I told myself I was strong enough to resist, that it had been a lapse in judgment, nothing more. But the truth was, I didn't want to resist, and that terrified me more than anything. I found myself avoiding his gaze, yet seeking him out in a crowded room. I forced myself to act normal, to pretend like nothing had changed, like I hadn't changed. But every stolen glance, every unspoken word chipped away at the illusion. I couldn't keep living in the space between. Sooner or later, I would have to make a choice. One path meant stability, loyalty, the life I had built brick by brick. The other was reckless, unpredictable, and laced with consequences I wasn't ready to face. But deep down, I knew. A choice wasn't really a choice if one option was just a lie, I told myself. And the truth was already burning inside me. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped fighting it. Maybe I had never really been fighting at all, just delaying the inevitable. What I do remember is the silence before it happened. The way the world seemed to still, as if it knew what was coming before I did. We were alone, the air between us charged with everything we hadn't said. I could feel the weight of the choice pressing down on me, but there was no hesitation left in my body. Only want, only need. He didn't ask, he didn't have to. The way I looked at him was enough. The first touch was electric, a spark igniting something deep inside me that had been waiting, smoldering for far too long. I should have stopped it. I should have walked away. But when his lips found mine, every thought, every doubt, every fear dissolved. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate, raw, the kind of hunger that comes from denying yourself for too long. I knew, even in that moment, that I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. That this wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice. And I was choosing him. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about consequences. I wasn't thinking about what came next. I was only thinking about this, the way he felt, the way I felt, the way everything else disappeared. By the time it was over, I knew there was no going back. I had given in, and nothing would ever be the same again. The high didn't last. It never does. Morning came too soon, dragging reality in with it. The warmth of the night before faded, replaced by a chill that had nothing to do with the air. I woke up knowing everything had changed. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that I could handle it, that I had known what I was doing. But the truth had sharp edges, and it cut through every excuse I tried to make. I had betrayed something, someone, maybe even myself. And now, the weight of it settled in my chest like a stone. I avoided looking in the mirror, afraid of what I'd see, of who I'd see. Did he feel it too? The regret? The guilt? Or was it just me, unraveling under the weight of what we had done? Every glance, every silence between us now felt heavier, loaded with everything we couldn't take back. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the night before. The way he had looked at me, the way I had let him, and the worst part, a part of me still wanted more. I hated myself for it. Hated the part of me that wasn't sorry enough. But regret doesn't erase what's been done. It just lingers, tightening its grip, reminding me over and over. There is no undoing this. There is only the fallout. Lying wasn't something I had planned for. But the moment the truth became too dangerous, I realized I had no choice. It started small. Half-truths, omissions, little things that didn't feel like real lies. But deception has a way of multiplying, spreading like cracks in glass until the whole thing shatters. Every conversation became a careful game. Every question a potential trap. Are you okay? Yes, just tired. How was your night? Uneventful. Anything new? Nothing at all. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like they belonged to someone else. I told myself I was protecting them, that I was sparing people from pain they didn't deserve. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was protecting myself. Every time I looked at him, I wondered if he was struggling like I was, if he was losing sleep, running conversations over in his head, calculating every move, or if this came easier to him. I started to notice the details, the way my voice tightened when I spoke, the way my hands fidgeted when certain names were mentioned. I was becoming someone else, someone I didn't recognize. And the worst part, I was getting good at it. The lies slipped out smoother, the guilt dulled, at least on the surface. But the paranoia? That only grew stronger. Every laugh from across the room felt like it was at my expense. Every silence between me and the people I loved felt like it was closing in. I had built a wall around the truth, and now I was trapped inside it. But no wall lasts forever. And I knew, deep down, it was only a matter of time before the cracks began to show. At first, I thought I could make it all fit, that if I just tried hard enough, stretched the truth here, rearranged a memory there, I could force everything into place. But the problem with forcing pieces together is that they never really hold. Something always slips. A story I told last week doesn't line up with what I say today. A detail I swore I'd keep straight suddenly doesn't make sense. Someone asks a question I hadn't prepared for, and for just a second, I hesitate. That second is everything. Doubt creeps in. A glance lasts too long. A silence stretches too far. People start noticing. They don't say anything at first, but I can feel it. The weight of unspoken questions, the shift in their voices, in their eyes, and that's when the panic sets in. I start rehearsing conversations before they even happen, trying to predict what might come up, how to stay ahead of it. I watch his face closely, searching for cracks in his own version of the story. Does he remember it the way I do? Has he slipped up too? The worst part is, I don't even know what I want anymore. Do I want to keep the illusion alive? Or do I want to rip it apart, just to see what's left underneath? But no matter how much I twist things, no matter how much I try to smooth over the inconsistencies, the pieces don't fit. And I know deep down, they never will. It doesn't happen all at once. People think breaking points are these loud, dramatic moments, shouting, throwing things, storming out the door. Maybe sometimes they are, but mine was quiet. It was in the way my hands shook when I reached for my phone. The way I stared at his name on the screen, knowing I couldn't believe a word he said anymore. The way my own reflection looked back at me, tired, hollow, like a stranger. I kept telling myself I could handle it, that if I just pushed through, things would settle. The truth would stop shifting under my feet. But the lies had piled up too high. And not just his, mine too. I had lied to myself, over and over again. Told myself I was okay, told myself it didn't matter, told myself I could live with the doubt, the half-truths, the missing pieces. But the body knows. My stomach had been in knots for weeks. My jaw ached from clenching it in my sleep. I woke up exhausted even after a full night's rest. And then one day I just stopped. Stopped pretending. Stopped explaining things away. Stopped waiting for an answer that would never come. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel, and let it hit me. All of it. The weight of knowing. The exhaustion of keeping up a story that was never mine to tell. And in that moment, I knew this was it, the breaking point. And once you reach it, there's no going back.